Okay, so we're moving on to the collar, these two pieces, and your collar stand, which is those two pieces. And remember, pattern should have said cut two and interface one of them. So cut two of the main piece, one piece of the interfacing. So remember, you can do your whole interfacing if you like, but I just do 2-inch strips. Honestly, I could have put another one here, but I didn't, mainly probably because this is just a sample. But you know, I could have put another strip on that side and another strip on that side, just to fill in the gap a little bit. So you should have 2 of your collar stands, okay, interface 1, okay, and then on the other one, on the wrong side, you're going to flip up whatever your seam allowance is and press that down. So these pieces are exactly the same, except for this one I just flipped up the bottom edge. And the bottom edge is probably better to see on this one. This is the curve. It goes down straight. So the straight edge, not the curve edge. So the straight edge is your bottom edge. And you just basically flip that up. Whatever your seam allowance all the way down, and you'll end up with something looking like that. And so you flip up the one that does not have the interfacing on it, okay? And then for your collar, you just interface the wrong side of one of your collars. Again, this is the wrong side that you're putting the interfacing on of the stand. And going back up to the stand just real fast, because you flip up your markings, you need to transfer your markings to this flip side, just so you can see. So I had 2 dots there, you know, that was here that I needed to put on the flip side there. And then there's also 2 snips. So you don't have to really mark the slits, you know, because you kind of still see kind of where they are, but I just put little dots there as well to let me know that slits don't cut. Just, you know, you're just marking to see where those slits were. There was something else I wanted to tell you about this. I forgot. Oh, yes, the collar piece portion. The collar piece portions goes on the outside of your body, okay? And it'll make more sense when we start the construction. And the ones that's not goes to the inside. So say that again. So the collar piece portions goes to the, we'll say the right side of the garment, which will be on the outside, what people see of your garment. And the ones that are not interface goes to the inside of the garment or the wrong side of the garment. So that's, just keep that in mind when we're constructing and when we're about to put the collar on the bodice itself, okay? That the interface goes to the right side of your garment, and the ones that are not interface will go to the wrong side on the inside of your garment. So just keep that in mind. That helps out, because a lot of people's like, oh, what goes which and how do I stack it? So just keep that in mind when we're about to do this portion. Okay, so next what you want to do is put right sides together of your collar, okay? So you're putting right side to right side of your collar, and I want you to pin. Okay. Once you get it all lined up, I need both my hands to get it lined up, but once you get it all lined up and pinned, what you're going to do is where the notches are, you're not going to sew that top piece. And you know, our collar has that little angle on it. So that's kind of how you can tell where you're going to start sewing, is that angle. So you want to do your seam allowance, whatever your seam allowance is, from the top down to the bottom of that angle, along your bottom. Get to that other angle at the other side and go up. And here you're going to leave this top portion open that has the notches on it, because eventually we're going to flip it right side out. So you need an opening to flip it right side out. So again, at the top, go down to the angle, across the bottom, go back up from that angle to the top. And then what you want to do is trim your seam allowance by half, all the way around. Okay, and then you're going to flip it from the, from this opening, flip it to the right side, so it's right side out. Then on the angles, you're going to poke out your corners. So your angle here and your angle over here, you're going to poke out your corners, and then you're going to give it a good press. Okay, and then now some people top stitch it so now we'll be looking at the right side, and you can top stitch it, which is 1/4 inch away from your your edges there, following the same path. Okay, so up, down to the angle, across, and up. Some people don't like to top stitch it, it's all in your preference. I would probably top stitch mine. I just like the way it look. And then from that point on, so once it's right side out and you top stitch it, or you don't, your preference, the opening that we had at the at the top, if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can now baste it closed, because now we no longer need it open, because why? We already turned it right side out. So now you can baste that if you like. So go ahead and do those steps, and then come back, and we will take it up from there. Okay, so this is me doing the collar, sewing the collar. So again, start here with the back stitch, go down to the angle, and then you're going to pivot, go across the bottom to the other angle, pivot, go up, and back stitch at the end. Remember, you kept your opening where your notches is, and kept that part open, so you can flip it inside out. Now you want to trim your seam allowances by half. All right, so we're just trimming by half, or close to the stitches. This could be 1/4 inch, because this this seam allowance is the commercial 5/8. So just stitch close. Stitch, cut, trim close to the stitches without going over. And then you want to trim angles. Remember, you're going to make that little triangle without cutting that point there. Remember, you're just going to cut across. Try to get as close as possible. You see, I cut it, it creates a little triangle. Come on out. Trying to show you my triangle. Like that. So repeat on the other side, on your other angle. Creates that little triangle effect there. All right, now you're just going to take it, flip it inside out. If you have a point turner, use your point turner to get those corners out. What you're going to do after this is, remember, give it a good press. So yours should look like this. And I gotta point out my corners there. I do have a point turner somewhere. Oh, there we go. A little point turner, get in, and so you can kind of course I'm trying to do it with one hand. So you can kind of point out those corners a little better. And it could be a little better if I put the bone down, but you know, you get the gist. Take your point turner and get in there and point out those corners. All right, so now give that a good press. You know, you have to roll your seam down there to, but of course, you know me, I'm just gonna finger press it to save a little time. All right, so remember at this point, you can now close off here if you like your opening, because we no longer need to have that open. So you can base that close if you like. And after you press it, if you say, oh, I like to top stitch it, remember top stitching is a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So you're basically following your previous stitch line, stitch down, across, up the other side. Now, if you do close it, what I want you to do is mark which side is the interface side. So that's my interface side. So on your right side, I want you to mark it. You know, take your chalk or however you're going to mark it. Here's my chalk. Mark which side is the interface side. I'm just going to put an I for interface. So you need to know that. Especially some garments, I can kind of feel this one, but some garments you can't. So you want to know which side is the interface side, because remember, interface side goes to the outside or the right side of your garment. So you need to know that. And if you close it, sometimes it's hard to, you can't peek in, you can't see. And then of course you can't always feel. Now, you also need to know that because now we got to sandwich the collar in between the stands, okay? So you want the interface sides to match, okay? And your collars will be right sides together, okay? It will be right sides together in between the sandwich. So, so now we have to flip this way, turn that, because this is the right side, right? And so, okay, so that's down, that's up. I'm trying to the best way to explain it. So just think, when you put the collar on, right, it's going to, okay, not to confuse you, it's going to lay this way, right? Once it's finished, it's all, and it's on you, it's going to lay this way, right? And so in the stand, it's going to be like this. Come on. It's going to be like this, right? So, all right. So this is the way the stand's going to look so far, right? This is the right side of the stand with interface side. This is the right side of your collar, and it's the interface side. And we know it's the interface side because we've got that little eye. So this is the way it'll look on the garment, on the right side of your garment, right? Do it again. This is the right side of the collar, okay? Interface side, right side, right side of the stand, sorry, interface side. This is the right side of the collar, interface side. Both of them are facing out. And this is how it's going to be worn. Okay, so so just lay it like that. So that's your first step, is just to lay that like that. All that explanation is just to say lay it, but I'm trying to explain it so it'll make sense. Now remember, now we're going to sandwich, so the collar stand pieces are right sides together. So you lay this on top, because this, when you flip it up and over, will go to the inside of your garment. Okay, and then this piece is facing of the collar is facing the inside of what, it's not facing, but it's obviously this isn't, because both of these are going to be on the outside, but the interface side, long as that piece is facing the outside of the garment. Okay, so I want to explain that again because I just don't want a confusion. It's really not that hard. Okay, so this is your layer. Okay, so basically how I want you to do it and how I want you to remember it is, I want you to put your collar stand, your first collar stand, that's interfaced, and your collar, where the interface piece is on, it's facing you. Lay that on top of each other like it will be worn on your garment. So this is how the piece, if you look at any of your garments, this is how it looks. Okay, you have your collar with the interface side facing you, facing outside. And if you look at any garment, you flip it up, then you see your stand. And that stand is the piece that has the interface side. So you want both right sides out facing you. So that's your first step. Now we want to sandwich the other collar that's gonna, when you flip it, it's going to be to the inside, so that it's right sides together with your other stand. So your two stands should be right sides together. Okay, so that is how you should be placing your sandwich. Okay, now that you got the sandwich together, and remember, another thing I want you to do to remember is this curve is at the top. I don't want you to turn it around so it'll be backwards as worn. So when you're placing that very first stand, make sure that the curve is at the top there. Okay, so now that you have your sandwich together, remember your stand pieces are right side together, and both of your first part of your sandwich, your bread, and then your meat. So your bread, both of them are right side up, and with the interface side facing outward, would be the right side of the garment. Okay. And then what you want to do is you have two dots on each side to correspond to your stands, and you want to make sure that those match up. And then for all pieces, you have your notches at the top. You want to make sure that they match up. And then here's the other dot on the other side, and that matches up. And so once you match up all of those, go ahead and pin. And what you're going to do is, at this point, so starting from here, and keep your seam allowance flipped up, okay, on your top piece that's not interfaced, keep that flipped up, and you're going to sew your seam allowance, and mine is about 5/8 up and around, and then along the top, which is basically straight, and then to get to the other curve and around. So sometimes what I like to do is take my marking tool along the curve. Okay, so starting at your angle here, and mark your 5/8 around that curve. So you have your guideline or your stitching line. That dot is probably at 5/8 stitching line until you get to basically straight. So start it here, go around till you get to, and that'll be your guide for your stitching line. So that will be nice in a curve, and do that on the other side. And then once you do that, come back after you sew it, and what we're going to do is actually trim the seam allowance to about 1/4 inch or half, and then we're going to flip the stand pieces, the 2 stand pieces, away from the collar. Okay, and that'll be the prep for our collar. Okay, go ahead and do that and come back. Okay, so now we went, I think I showed you this part, but make your little dots as a guideline, your sewing guideline, just to get around that curve. And this is basically straight, and I had the little dots on this side. And remember to keep your seam allowance flipped up. You don't really need to sew all the way down, but I just do, just to, you know, kind of follow that guide. But once you get to your seam allowance here that's flipped up, you want to make sure to backstitch, focus, backstitch there, and it's a little bit more pronounced on that side. And so, you know, sew all the way when you get here to where your flipped up is, make sure to backstitch at that part, you know, so around, and that is your seam allowance, and that's kind of like a straight. It has a little bit of a curve, but it's mostly a straight line. So now what you want to do is we want to trim this, and I would say close to your stitch line. So typically I would do by half, because I do 1/2 inch seam allowance, but since this is 5/8, just get close. You want to do like 1/4, leave 1/4 there all the way around. So if you got to do it in sections, you can, you know, and what I mean by sections, so like kind of go off like that, especially around that curve. Before I get to that curve, I'm gonna go off. Okay, so you should look something like this, all trimmed. And now you want to flip so that your stands are away from your collar. So just flip it. Oops. Flip it so your stand is away from your collar. Alright, and you want to give this a good press. Okay, so you want to just basically give this a good press, because it's not going to lay flat for me until you press it. So this one I will have to press. Try to finger it first. Okay, so I didn't I didn't iron mine, but I wanted to show you that sometimes, just just depends on the pattern. Usually this all will lay flat. I mean, this will lay completely flat. But I want you to notice that at that curve, remember that curve at the top, this is pronouncing that curve, so it's not allowing it to lay flat like that, because that is that curve. Okay, so sometimes your pattern, don't think that's an error, because it's not. It's just, it's pronouncing up that curve. And also what I did was I clipped that curve. Remember the outside, you do those triangles, the outside curve. So I went on the inside, along that curve on the inside, and did those little triangle to help expand that. But it's still, and this is, you can really see it there, it just won't allow it to lay flat, right, because of that curve. But it's doing what it's intended to do, because when it's flipped the correct way, right, as worn, I mean, orient it so you can see it as worn. It's doing what it's supposed to do. This just doesn't just have that, that's that curve, remember? And that's just the way that pattern is. So it lays the way it's supposed to. So that's fine. Just try to iron it as best you can. The straight pieces that you can iron that flat, and then when you get to that little curve area, you just go in with your iron at the angle that I'm going in now. Pretend this is your iron, and just try to iron that like that. It's getting in that corner. And so this is your collar piece, and that's the way. That's just part of my, let me take that off. This is the way your collar should look. Okay, all ironed in, it would look like that with that little curve at the end. Excuse me. So yes, I just wanted to show you that that's not a mistake. That's some of your pattern pieces that's a little pronounced of that curve. And on this one, it seems to be. At least I don't think I made a mistake. But hey, could, but I don't think so. And so to insert this now, so remember, this side is the interface side, and this top piece layer is the interface. So both of these are interface, because we have that little eye interface, and this is the interface side. So those both will be on the outside as worn. So what you want to do is, now you're going to get your bodice piece, and looking at so your bodice is right side facing up. Okay, right side facing up. And then we're going to put your collar piece and the interface side, the raw edge that's not flipped up. You want it so it's right side to right side. And we're going to start at the back. You should have, on your bodice back, you should have notches. Okay, and you're just going to match up your notches. Okay, And so, ouch, you can see that. So you have 2 notches on your collar, 1, 2, 2 notches on your bodice piece. And so you're matching that up, and remember your interface side is the side that you're working on now. So match those up. These dots correspond to your shoulder seam. So once you do that, then you're going to move along to your shoulder. And once you do that, we may have to clip in a little bit, but we'll do that if we got to do that. So for right now, I just want you to try to pin at your notches and at your dots. Okay. Okay, so this is your shoulder seam notch, and it's matched up at the shoulder of the bodice, right? And so what do you see? What's bigger? Your collar is bigger, right? So what do? We did the same thing in the sleeve, right? So you're going to put some slits into the bodice because we got to mimic or create the illusion that the bodice has more fabric. So between this dot and that notch right there, where that pin is, so right here in this little area, you're gonna do like maybe two snips. Ooh, let me see if I can do it while I'm holding it. 3. Let's do 2 first. And what that does is, once you spread it, once you spread it, I'm going to pin my shoulder. So you can see I'm pinning my shoulder because that is the shoulder seam. All right. So now those slits that we did creates the illusion of more fabric. So once we pull, we try to match, they now match, right? So find the middle and put a pin. There you go. If you want, you can put pins on either side of those since we did the slit to help hold that in place. With those slits, what it does is just creates the illusion of more fabric because it expands the fabric. All right, and so that's what that looks like now. We put slits on the bodice because the bodice was shorter than the collar. So the same thing is probably going to happen on this side. Align the dot to your shoulder, and you get a little bit, probably a little less, so probably only put 1 slit in there, but do the best, basically the same thing on that side. Okay, go ahead and do that, and then we will finish the around the collar. So go ahead and do from that notch to the shoulder, and see if you have any gaps. If you do have the gap, you know, the gap will probably be more fabric in your collar, right? And your bodice piece is shorter, so you're just going to snip into the shorter piece because that expands it and gives the illusion that you have more fabric. So those two will match up. Okay, so go ahead and do that and come back. Okay, so from where we had to do the little snips, so from the dot to the center front, basically, I didn't really have to do any snips in that to expand the fabric, so that's kind of basically straight, so I just pinned that. Just one thing I want you to take notice, this is basically a straight line, and it's got to come kind of along a curve. So, you know, the way I do it is I kind of hold up the collar and kind of create that curve as I'm doing it. And then, you know, I'll place it at the end, or, you know, wherever the marking is, but at the end here, you know, put that mark, and then, or put the pin in, and then from there, I'll pick it up and kind of stretch it, you know, hold the two pieces together. So where that green pin is, from there to where my finger is, I'll kind of stretch both of them and then put pins in to secure. So that's how I do that. So yeah, you know, kind of hold your collar and kind of create the curve with the collar. Place it, hold that part, grab basically where your dot is, that dot, green pin, pull the pieces basically apart from one another so they stretch and will be flush with one another, and then, you know, pin along the remaining area, and that's it. And then once you do that, we're going to sew it, but only the interface side to the shirt. You're going to leave this fold up side out the way. You're not going to sew that down. Okay, so again, you're going to sew your seam allowance, interface side of the stand to the back of your shirt, and remember, it should be right sides facing, and whatever your seam allowance is. And then from that point, you're going to trim that seam allowance, because we don't need all that bulk in there, you know, to about 1/2 or 1/4 inch, and then we'll come back from there. So one thing I want to mention, as we're sewing this collar down to the collar stand, sorry, down to the back of the shirt, it's kind of like that sleeve where you want to make sure, you know, that you're keep looking underneath, just like we did with the sleeve, and do it a little bit at a time, and making sure that this band area is flat as we sew. Okay, so just do a little bit at a time. Keep checking underneath, you know, pushing back fabric if you need to, and, you know, pulling a little bit to ensure that that part is flat. I think I said straight at first, but you want to make sure that, you know, it's flat, that is won't be any puckers or anything. So yes, I just wanted to mention that as you sew. Again, go slowly, take your time, check the underside, feel for any bumps or lumps, and make sure to try to keep that area, spanned area, as flat as possible. Go slow, you know, about 1 inch or 2 at a time. And really, based on, because you have a lot of pins in here, you know, hopefully you won't be going fast anyway, because you can't, you're not supposed to be sewing over your needles. So, okay. Okay, so this is looking at it from the right side. We had just sewn the stand, which is this portion, to the back of the shirt. And so remember when I was telling you, go slow, feel underneath, you know, try to have it as flat as possible so there's no puckers. So first I want to show you and go around. This, it kind of looks like a pucker right there, but it really isn't. It just is my fabric and just needs to be ironed. So that really isn't one. Okay, so once I kind of press it out, you can kind of see that that's really not a pucker. But this is I just sewed, I don't know what I was doing. I wasn't feeling it, so it wasn't flat underneath. So I did it on this side. And this again is not a pucker at this shoulder seam. Just needs to be ironed out, so that's fine. And again, at this shoulder seam, if I flatten it out, it's fine. Just kind of looks like a pucker, but it's just the fabric. But I did it again on this side, just sewed right over there. So I'm glad it happened. I'm gonna correct it on one side and it's basically the same correction on the other side. So you need your seam ripper, and what you want to do is where this is, you want to open that back up. So I would probably start here a little bit before it and a little bit after where it is. So you're going to go to the inside of it, you know, where the seam here, and open this up, open this back up. Okay, so go ahead and do that because you want to release this. Open that back up and come back, and I'll show you at the sewing machine how to fix it. It's very simple. So it's the same method to fix from this and any puckers or anything that you see. All right, so I just want to show you, you can kind of see where I sewed over, made that little fold. So I opened it up, opened up the stitches, opened it a little bit before and a little bit after. So now you have that opening. So what you want to do is pin, you know, place your pin so that it's flat as possible. And we're going to take it back to our sewing machine and sew it. And what we're going to do is we're going to start a little bit before this here, and we're going to back stitch, do our sewing, and continue on to this previous stitch a little bit, about, you know, half an inch, quarter inch to a half an inch, and back stitch. Okay, and I'll show you at the sewing machine this. And remember to keep this as flat as possible as you pin, and you keep it as flat as possible when we get to the sewing machine, and again checking the underside. Okay, so what I did is I'm starting it a little bit before. So I'm take a pen so you can kind of see where I'm starting. I'm starting it probably about right there, and then when I end it, I'm going to be ending it about right there. I don't know if you can see that. I'll take that out so you can see my little marking. So a little bit before the stitches and a little bit after the stitches. All right, so put that underneath there. Place a foot down. Here's your needle. Now, make sure to check underneath, make sure that is flat, flat, flat. And you're going to start your stitches. Then you're going to back stitch. And then you're going to sew, make sure everything is flat. There's no, look underneath, make sure there's no bunches. Checking underneath, make sure everything is flat. No lumps, bumps, tucks, pleats, and all that. Then I'm gonna go beyond till I get to my blue. I'm gonna go beyond the existing stitches until I get to my little mark. And like I said, it's about a half an inch past the existing stitches. You're gonna back stitch. Alright. Cannot find my scissors. Alrighty. So I'm looking at the front, and now it's gone. Okay. So you stitched basically from here, restitched from here to here, and as you see, it is now no more tuck. So that's the way that is, and then finish it do the same. Well, if you may not, so I got to do the same thing on the other side over here to fix that. Okay, and honestly I probably won't because this is just a sample, but I wanted to show you how to fix it. And then when you iron it, again, that is just my fabric. There's no really just gotta iron it. But from there to there, you see it's fixed, and it's very, very simple, and you can't really see the back stitches. It doesn't show, you know, there's no more pronunciation of, oh, you back stitched, you know, on the right side. And that's how you fix if you have any pleats, you know, because you wasn't paying attention like me, or going too fast, or, you know, it happens, okay? And so that's your collar. Collar stand, finish that. So now what we're going to do is, looking at the inside, we're going to trim the seam line that we just did, attaching the stand to the back of the shirt. We're going to trim that, you know, close to the stitching line there, or 1/4 inch, however you want to, you know, you say it. And then once we do that, you want to, excuse me, press your seam allowance up into your collar. And then you're going to take your folded over collar stand that's not interfaced, and you're going to bring it just beyond the stitch line. Just beyond the stitch line, okay? And again, we are still looking at the inside when we do this. And then you want to pin. You can pin on the inside first just to make it easier, because we are, you know, placing the inside of the collar here. But eventually we're going to replace those inside pins with outside pins from the right side, because we'll be stitching from the right side. But I always find it easier just to place the pins, like for instance here, you know, just beyond, and then I place a pin to secure that, like that. And then what I do is turn it over, and I can see my pin mark there. And what I do is just take another pin and kind of put it right directly next to it. You know, like that. And then I'll remove the pin from the inside. And that's how I do that. But it's just easier to secure it from the inside first, just in my opinion. All right, so, but first things first, what we're going to do is trim the seam allowance, press it so that it's up inside the collar, okay? And then from that point, we're going to take the folded over collar stand so that it's just beyond that stitch line, so that it's just beyond that stitch line, like that. And we're going to pin it on the inside, all around the bottom of the collar stand. All right, do that and come back. Okay, so just wanted to mention, this is me still pinning on the inside. Just how we had to pick up the collar and shape it around that curve, you got to kind of still do that when you're doing this stand too, along you know, some of the curves, because you want it to lay as flat as possible, right? So I'm trying to, so you know, you just can't, like for instance, just put it down like that, okay? Because what does that do? That creates a little, that tuck right there, right? So you know, working in little sections at a time, what you want to do is kind of flatten out your shirt. And this is the side that I didn't fix, that tuck I did, but and then as you flatten your shirt out, then you kind of place your, collar stand. So I would place a pin there, and then I would move on to the next section, kind of flatten that shirt out. Okay, so here I need it kind of flat. So in order to make it flat, you got to kind of, you know, you may have to work around that curve. and then you place it. If you want that shirt underneath to be as flat as possible. Probably better on this side to show you. This is the side I fixed. So along the curve, you make your shirt as flat as possible like that, and then you bring your collar down above it, and so when I release it, you kind of see it kind of puckers, but you just do it section by section. Here's another one. You make that your shirt as flat as possible for the section that you're doing, and then you pin like that. Okay. It's more of a feel when you do it. You're kind of understand as you do it. You just don't want to just put it here. You got to kind of spread out the shirt and do it, you know, 1 inch at a time, 2 inches at a time. Spread that out so that it lays flat. Okay, so for instance, let's do it like that's kind of flat, but that part isn't flat. This part right here, right? So if you just put that over like that, that's going to create a tuck. So you want to see how I'm moving the shirt, moving it so now that portion right here will be flat. Now that that's flat, okay, no puckers, it's flat, then you put it over and pin. As you see, that part is now flat. Then you pin, then you move on to the next section. Okay, and that's just because you're working with kind of a curve on your bodice piece, and your collar stand basically is straight. So because it's your bodice piece is kind of curved, you know, your neckline goes like a happy face, kind of. You gotta kind of do it in sections, move sections and straighten that section out, move in another section, straighten that section out, because it is in a curve. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, I can re-explain it. You know, ask me questions and we can re-explain it. So what I'm doing, I'm gonna finish pinning that portion here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the front side, to the correct side, and then I'm going to repin using my pins as a guide. So for instance, I'm going to pin right here. Okay, do it with one hand, but you know, I already demonstrated that, but you know, I just take a pin and put it basically next to each one of those other pins, so now that it's right side out. And then once that's done, starting in the middle on the lower portion, because that's, we need to tack that lower portion down, the bottom down. So starting in the middle of your stand, you're going to sew around, go up, you know, that little curve there and around, and you want to do it about a 1/8 seam allowance. So you're basically, this is a edge stitch that you're doing. Go all the way around the little curve, come back down till you get to that end part or the starting part, and you're going to back stitch. So you back stitch at the beginning, go around to the top, and we're edge stitching here, so it's 1/8 away. Come back to where you started, go over where you started, beyond that about, you know, a 1/2 inch, and back stitch. Okay, so go ahead and do that and come back and you'll have a finished collar. Okay, and I just noticed I did the sandwich wrong. The collar piece sandwich is actually, when you flip it, it's face up, and I've been saying face up for forever, and that is just so wrong. It should be against the body, so it should be on this piece, because when you flip it down, it should be against the body. I want to say, I'm gonna double check that. And then I'll just submit a diagram of the sandwiching portion. Okay, all right. Okay, so I transferred my pins to the right side, correct side of the garment, and again we are going to start in the middle of the band at the bottom, and you just want to make sure it will catch, because we did do a little oops. So look right here, you see it's kind of coming out, so I'm just going to tuck that in and place another pin. So I want to make sure that that does catch. So it needs to be another pin right there, even though the other two are kind of fairly close. There's my pin. So again, mark it from the inside first. It's just easier for me. Take it, mark the inside. All right, turn it to the right side, and I can see my mark right there. And so I'm just going to take my pen, stick it right, and this is at the bottom edge, stick it right next to it, and then from the inside I'll remove my guide pin. Okay, and so that's all marked there. All right, so again, starting basically in the middle. You don't have to be exactly in the middle, you can eyeball it. And we're going to do an edge stitch, which is about 1/8 of an inch. And on my presser foot, I have a hole in the middle, and so that's where I line my seam line, in that groove or hole in the middle of my presser foot. And it just seems to be, an edge stitch, 1/8 of an inch when I do that. Alrighty, and as you sew, you want, because it is a curve, take it slow, and you may have to guide your fabric so whatever portion you're sewing is flat. You don't want to keep it like that, because that could bunch up. So just guide it and just make sure that wherever edge, the edge stitch portion is flat. So I'm just going to start it. And back stitch. And of course you would use a coordinating thread. I'm using green, just so you'll be able to see. Go slow. Make sure to keep the portion that you're working on flat. And again, we're starting in the middle and going around. And I want to show you just up until we get to the curve. Because usually with the curve, I have to, obviously you're kind of pivoting, but I have to lift up my presser foot, turn, lift up my presser foot and turn, to make that curve. And of course you can do a stitch guideline if you want, but remember this is on the correct side of your garment, so you want to make sure that it'll come off. So you can either do a chalk mark, or I have the pins that will go away when you iron over it. So whatever method you find easiest. And again, flatten it out as you sew. And again, what this bottom does, that's on this bottom of the stand, it's not just decorative. We are actually securing the inside of the band down to the shirt. At the same time. see white on white, and then you have the white light. And all I'm doing is just going slow and then making sure the portion of what I'm sewing is flat. And here we're getting to the little curve. Ooh, oops, I didn't take that other pin out on that side. Alrighty. And remember, we're just edge stitching. So you're going to come around and get as close to the, you know, you're supposed to be about 1/8, right? So about there. And I usually lift my presser foot, kind of pivot a little bit. A little bit, a little bit, pivot. This is just a little fussy, so pivot a little bit. And all this does is release that fabric so you can kind of move it around. Okay. A little bit more of a straight there. Coming to the top. Turn and pivot. Get most of that fabric out the way. I can probably do one more. So pivot it around, going back, going up. Let's start over at the top. Trying to get it as flat as possible. Okay. And the rest of the process is the same. So just finish going all the way around and go back to the, you know, when you get here, you know, slowly go around that curve, come back to the bottom, which would be tacking the inside of that stand down to the inside. And then once you get to where you started, okay, once you get to where you started, I want you to go past it by about 1/2 inch and then back stitch, and then you'll be finished. Okay, come back when you finish. Okay, so this is the edge stitch. Remember, this is the beginning and ending of it. So you back stitch at both. When you come to the end, you go past where you started, about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, and back stitch. But this is the starting point, and again, it's an edge stitch, about 1/8 away. So all the way around, all the way around. Here it gets a little fussy because you gotta kind of lift up your presser foot, turn, lift up presser foot, turn, around there, all the way around. You come back down to your end point. Again, you go over about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. And so remember, when you was doing the bottom half of the stand, you know, that served two purposes, is to have that edge stitch look on the outside, but it also catches the inside of your stand and secures it to the inside, okay, at the bottom. Okay, and so that is your collar. You give that a good nice press, and you know, that's the way your collar look. You give it a nice press. That's your collar, and that's your stand. Okay, so the only thing I need to find out is whether this is on the outside or under, because I always thought this, so this is the stand with the interface side to the right side of the garment. So This is the right side, so it faces the right side of the garment. I always thought that piece was also supposed to be interfaced. So interfaced, but you flip it down and it faces the garment. But this is the interface side because I have that eye. And I don't think, because this is supposed to be non-interface matching the non-interface, which goes to the inside. So I think, I know I probably did this sandwich incorrectly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to post a picture of the way that sandwich is supposed to look. But all the other steps are the same. I swear I always get that confused and messed up and said I was going to get it right this time, but obviously I didn't. But I explained it right. I said, you know, the interface side to the interface side, non-interface side to the non-interface side. But when I did my sandwich, I did it backwards. But anywho, that is your collar. And then some people, honestly, they make it all interfaced because they want it to be stiffer. So in that case, it really wouldn't matter, you know, because everything is interfaced. And I think some people do that because they get confused, like I got confused, and they say, instead of getting all confused, I'm just gonna make everything interface, so it doesn't matter which one, you know, side is the outside and which side is the inside. But of course that does make your collar just a tad bit stiffer. So if you don't mind that effect, go ahead and do it that way. But I'm going to again insert a picture of how you sandwich it. So we both would know, we all would know what is the correct way. But anywho, so this is your collar and your collar stand. Okay, so now we are finished with our sample shirt of everything that needed to be done with the sample. And oh, I also write on my samples. So this was the sleeve, and this is everything basically that I explained to you about the sleeve, about the minimum ease, and then how sometimes it's in the cap and then sometimes it's in the shoulder area. And because this is a drop shoulder, which means it's not on the shoulder point, this the ease is not really needed at the shoulder, so they put it in the blade part of the shoulder. So that's what all this is explaining. So this, I'm going to take this off of my sample and put this in my binder, and so it'll have all my notes on it. And this is about the gathering. Okay, that's my little back stitch, and this is saying that we're easing it, and this is my long tails drawing of my long threads. So again, what I'm going to do is actually just cut around the sleeve, and then take the sleeve off and put that in my binder. I'm also going to cut the collar piece off and put that in my binder. And we already did the burrito method, and so I cut that part off, as you can see. I'm going to put that in my binder. And then we also did the bind, the front band of the shirt. So I cut that part off and going to put that in my sample binder. And so I'll have samples of everything that has to do with the shirt. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to show you is, remember I told you, I may show you two more things. This particular pattern does not have a patch pocket or breast pocket, but I'm going to show you how to do that, which is very simple, because it'll probably be one of the variations that we do. I'll just wait, because if it's a variation, I'd like to do my samples right before the variation, so I'll wait on that. I'm going to show you the crimping. And so you should have cut out another sleeve. I can't find my sleeve, but I'm going to take this back over to the sewing machine and show you about the crimping. And then so this is what, Sunday? So starting Tuesday, we're going to be doing the real pattern. Okay, so hopefully you guys are ready for that. And I look forward to seeing any work that you're doing, whether it's a project that we're doing, something you're doing on your own. You know, feel free to post it. I would love to see it. Okay, everybody, have a great, happy Easter Sunday. You know, if you celebrate that, or just a happy Sunday. Okay, bye. And this is just me showing you that I had cut out the pieces and marked it up, you know, for my future reference. And then when I make up my little instructions, so I can have that. And so this is the sleeve, and I just made sure to mark that what the back was, and I already explained to you what all that writing was. And that's the front. So that's the sleeve. This is the collar, and I marked up the collar of how it's supposed to be. So as you can see, this is the collar. This is the non-interface side, collar, band, or stand. And this is the non-interface side. And so for the collar, band, or stand, this will face the wrong side, or the inside of the garment. For the collar, the non-interface side, this faces the public because it's flipped down. Okay, so turning it over, this is the interfaced collar, and this will be right side flipped under, and it's going to face the shirt back. Okay, so right side, it's going to be right side, but it's going to be flipped under so that it's facing the shirt back. And this little piece down here is the shirt back. I'll probably mark that the shirt back. So when you flip it under, it's facing the shirt back. Okay, and so this is the interface collar stand, and this is on the right side, the public side. Okay, and like I said, I'll put, this is the shirt back. I'll write on here, shirt back. I'll write it down, and then I'll show you. I just added the word shirt back, and that just helps me with this portion. That is right side, but when you flipped under, it faces the shirt back like that. Okay, and so so that's why I think samples are so useful. You know, good reference. And then, you know, most definitely I use it when I'm writing up my instructions, you know. Okay, so that's that. And so come Tuesday, we'll start the regular real project version 1 of the button down shirt using pattern, using Simplicity pattern 8416, and we're going to be doing view A. Okay, and view A is just your traditional shirt. And again, this one does not have the patch pocket, so we're not going to go over that one right now. I don't want to add it if we're not doing it right now. And then remember, at a later time, probably when we do the long sleeves with the cuffs, that's when we will add the patch pocket in. So that'll probably be version 2. And that's it. And like I said, I'll insert a picture at the very end of the sandwich of how your collar and collar stand should be sandwiched. And that's it. Okay, everybody have a good day. All right, so here is a picture that I like because they're all different colors. So the dark blue at the bottom the first layer that's on the table at the bottom, dark blue, that's your stand, and that's your interface stand. Okay, the purple on top that has the folded up seam allowance is your stand also. It just has the folded up seam allowance, and that one is not interfaced. Okay, and the polka dot in the middle is your collar. The blue polka dot, blue and white polka dot in the middle is your collar sandwiched in between your two stands. Now we know, and I think this is the easy part, that your stands are right side to right side, right? And of course the one on the bottom, interface, your interface part is facing down, facing down. So the issue with me, and maybe with you as well, is the collar in the middle. Is it face up, face down for the interface side? And it is face down, okay? It is face down for the interface side of the collar. So a good way, I guess, to remember it is both interface pieces are face down. Okay, meaning facing toward the table and away from you. Okay, you should not be able to see or feel, for the collar per se, the interface side. Okay, so again, the stands, easy part, right sides together, and you start off with the interface side of the stand at the bottom with the collar in the middle. The interface side is also going to face the table away from you. So both interface pieces are face down. And then you sandwich with the top layer of the stand with this flipped up seam allowance. Okay, so again, your stands are right sides together and your interface pieces are right side down, or interface side down. Let's just say interface side down, not right side down. That's incorrect. It is interface side down. I'll say it one more time. Your stand pieces are right sides together with the stand on the bottom. Interface is the interface side is face down. The collar is face down, the interface side. So both interface sides are facing down. Okay. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to make a note of it in a little drawing. But this is a good picture to kind of show, because it's different colors. The only difference is with the collar, you can't really see what side is interface and what, if it's face up and face down. But now we know it is face down. The interface side is face down. Okay, any questions? Let me know.